You're listening to the North Parkway Podcast, weekly talks designed to help you take the next step in your spiritual journey. You can learn more about our church at northparkway.org. And if these talks are helpful to you, consider using the link in the description to give. Your financial support helps us continue to make great content. All right, well, that's enough intro. Let's get to today's talk. I want to talk to you about a health crisis that's facing America today that's really serious and is not talked about nearly enough. It's one that changes the quality of life of Americans, but even more concerning than that, it changes the quantity of life. There's a health crisis in our country that statistically is shown to reduce the life expectancy of people who suffer from it by up to 29%. That's way earlier to check out on life. If you guys grew up in the 90s on the dare, don't do drugs kind of deal, right? It's equivalent to smoking 2 packs of cigarettes every day for your entire adult life, with the health outcome. And the problem with it is that it's affecting a lot of people that don't really even realize it, and certainly don't realize how bad it is. The scariest part about this health crisis is that recent studies suggest that as many as 60% of Americans are suffering from it today. That's more than half of you guys here in the room and at home. You say, okay, well, what is this problem? Well, it's not obesity. It's not diabetes. It's not lead in the water. It's not LTE 5 ultra wide. It's not being a Packers fan. It's not any of the things that would come to mind. We love our Packers fans most of the time. Boo. It's loneliness. Loneliness is an epidemic in our world, and it's something that isn't just an emotional burden. It's such a heavy emotional burden that it takes a physical toll on your body. And many of you walked in today, you know what it's like to be in a season of loneliness. You may know what it's like because you're right in the middle of a season of loneliness. And I want to talk today about how, with God's help, we can set that burden down. But I want to talk to you about why you should not be in a hurry to do it. Because if you want to do it right, it's one that you have to do slowly. It's part of our series entitled Traveling Light. We talked about it a minute ago with the little passports, and you see all the luggage behind me. I want to give credit to Max Lucado. This series and today's talk is inspired by and based on the book that he wrote entitled Traveling Light. If you're watching from home, there's actually a link in the bottom of the description where you can buy that book, or if you're listening to this podcast later, you can jump on the description there. I would highly recommend it if you haven't read it. But he presents this basic premise that we walk through life carrying emotional burdens, carrying spiritual burdens that weigh us down, and a lot of times we don't even realize it. But there are things that are too heavy that you weren't designed to carry. And if you ask for God's help, if you follow his leadership through life, if he is, as the psalmist David said, the shepherd who guides you through this journey of life, you can trade the heaviness that you walk to him with his burden, which is light. It's knowing God and serving him. And so week by week, we've been looking at all of these things that you have, all of these things that weigh you down. And today I want to focus on loneliness because I know that it's one that many of you can relate to. Maybe you're dealing with it right now. If you have fill-in-the-blank notes, I want you to write some of these things down. And we'll start with a definition of loneliness so that we make sure that we're all tracking the same pace here. Write this down. Loneliness is not a lack of interaction. It's a lack of intimacy. The problem with loneliness is not really a lack of interaction in your life. It's a lack of intimacy. It's a lack of meaningful interaction. It's a lack of people who know your story and know who you are and are close to you, and you share things back and forth at a deeper level than just surface. The problem of loneliness in America has been growing steadily, almost on a straight line, since 1976. You say, well, what happened in 76? Well, that's when we started tracking loneliness. As long as we've been gauging this and tracking this in our society, it's been getting worse. Now, in that span of time, the population in the United States has grown by 60%. There are more people everywhere. And there are more social interactions in your life, most likely, than any generation that's ever lived on the planet. We have all of the different social media channels that you know so well. You have long-distance phone calls. Anybody remember when you had to time out long-distance phone calls? Your family lives in another state. Anybody like, I'm waiting till 9 o'clock when I can make that phone call, because, right? We don't have to deal with that stuff anymore. You can FaceTime with family in China in real time. And, okay? We have all of these things and ways to interact. But more and more and more, people in our society are feeling the lack of meaningful interactions. It's a heavy burden when you feel like you're going through life and nobody really knows your story. Nobody really knows what you're dealing with. Or nobody cares enough to listen to the struggles that you walk through life with, and it's just you. It's a heavy, heavy burden. And if you feel that burden, there's this desire, this need to get rid of it as soon as possible, to fill that missing piece, to fill that gap as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And I want to help you to hand that burden off, but I want you to do it in a way that actually fixes the problem in the long run. You don't want to put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, and I want to help you to do it well. So write this down. I have a couple of tips. Here's the first one, okay? Don't shop for groceries when you're hungry. Okay? That's a good tip just at face value. Don't go shopping for groceries when you're hungry. I have violated this one so many times. There was a season in life where Natasha and we were not living paycheck to paycheck, but we were pretty close. And we were, I mean, if it wasn't on the list, it wasn't going in the shopping cart. Okay? We thank God we are not in that situation now. I can actually just go to the store and say, this sounds good. Let's try that this week. But have you ever gone grocery shopping when you're hungry and then you get home and you go through the stuff and you're like, why did I even buy it? I don't even like this. Or it happens more often, you go grocery shopping, you're hungry, your spouse goes through the bag and says, why did you buy this? The kids don't even eat this. I don't know, it looked good, babe. Okay? We already have 4 of them at home. I didn't check the pantry. Okay? You get yourself into trouble. In the same way, you don't want to go shopping for intimacy when you're starving and just say, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. Anything to fix the hole. Because you end up, just like when you're grocery shopping, you end up making some concessions that you really shouldn't make if you want intimacy, if the goal is intimacy. And here's what that looks like. Okay? That looks like the student who really wants to get accepted into the crowd, and you end up wearing different clothes because this is what your friends are wearing, watching different shows, listening to different music, talking different ways, making fun of different people. Whatever you need to do, because this is what the kids who are accepted do. It's the single woman who lowers her standards for dating so far that everyone who loves you and who sees this guy's profile on Facebook knows by the first date, this is not going to end well. He looks like he just got out of prison and he's about to go back into prison. Why are you dating this guy? The last 4 guys look just like this guy. Because you're desperate for intimacy. It's the successful man in his middle of his life who says, I have a perfectly good house, but I need to sell it and get a different house because all of the other guys at work have this house, and it's all on the golf course, and I need to get the golf cart so that I can ride around on the golf course, even though I don't golf, but it's cool and I've always wanted one, and whatever needs to happen so that I'm accepted like they are. And the problem is none of those things actually bring you intimacy. Having sex with a stranger or having sex with a screen, it's good for a moment, but then that moment is gone and you're just as lonely as you were before. it doesn't actually fill you. And write this down. If you don't have intimacy with God, no relationship will fill you. The primary source of intimacy begins, the foundation of that, of a meaningful relationship in your life, it begins with intimacy with the God who made you. David talks about this in Psalm 23. He says, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. And there's power when you realize that even when I'm in a dark time, even when I'm in a tough season, that God who made me and loves me and is my shepherd, that God is with me. There's power in knowing that you're not truly alone. And the good news for you is that if you want intimacy with God, you don't have to go chasing him out. You don't have to go far out to try to find where he is, try to delve through all of the mysteries of the heaven. He's already come looking for you. Psalm 27:8, this is also David writing. He says to the Lord, my heart has heard you say, come and talk with me. Think about that. What an amazing thought that God who created the universe looks into somebody's life and says, hey, you, why don't you come and sit down and spend a little time with me? And the beautiful thing about being on this side of Jesus coming to the world is that Jesus said, when I'm lifted up on the cross, I will draw all mankind to me. That means that every one of us has an invitation that God has looked into your life and said, I want you to come and get to know me. I want you to know what it's like to be filled when I'm part of your life. David goes on, when the Lord is with me, he says, verse 10, even if my father and mother abandoned me, the Lord will hold me close. There's something different about being loved unconditionally by God. See, God loves you for you. Psalm 139:1. David said, O Lord, you have examined my heart, and you know everything about me. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. Now think about this. It's an interesting two-verse thing here. On the one hand, he says, God, you know everything about me. You know all the good and the bad, every detail. And then he says, your workmanship, which is me, the job you did creating me is awesome. Right? I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but if I did, I believe there would be a lot of hands if I said, how many of you, when you look at everything about you and you think about the idea of someone knowing everything about you, it makes you say, man, I am awesome. Okay? Because some of you guys, maybe, for me, that's not the first thing that comes to mind. Okay? When I think of someone knowing everything about me, I'm like, oh boy. Right? There's some embarrassing parts in there. And that's part of why when you just want intimacy, when you're hungry for intimacy and you go looking for it from people first, you feel like you need to present a version of yourself that's more palatable. It's more acceptable. Okay? Let me show you the reality. Okay? High school student, if you have to wear something different, if you have to get a different haircut, if you have to talk about different things, if you have to use different language for them to accept you, they don't accept you. They accept a projection of you. They don't actually know you. It's not intimacy. Single woman, if you have to sleep with him for him to want to continue to be with you, he doesn't actually love you or want you. He wants what he can get from you. That's not intimacy. If you have to buy something, build something, become something, figure something out, gift something, if you have to do that in order for people to accept you, they don't actually love you. They love a projection of you. And intimacy is this idea that somebody knows everything about me, and rather than reject me, they accept me and they lean in. And when you come to God and you allow him to love you unconditionally, you allow yourself to be to be emotionally naked with nothing covering anything, and he says, I know everything that there is to know, and I love you, and I want you, and I've still invited you to come and know me, it does something different. It does what it did for David. It allows you to say all of the good and the bad put together is something valuable and important. And it allows you to feel differently about yourself. I want you to write this down in your notes. If you don't love yourself, it's hard to allow someone else to. I want to say that again because I think somebody really, you really needed to hear this. I felt this as I was preparing last night. If you don't love yourself, it's hard to allow someone else to. Some of you have tried to love someone who's stuck in that gap. Here's what happens. If you don't love yourself and you don't believe that you are lovable, you will shot block every attempt that someone makes to love you. You don't really think that. You don't really think I'm pretty. You don't really think I'm respectable. You don't really want to be. You're probably just checking to see what better offer. You're probably just stuck with me because you couldn't get anybody else. You're probably just hanging out with me because your real friends aren't. Okay? And we want to have intimacy with other humans, but it begins, the foundation is being loved by God and allowing him to love you unconditionally. And allowing that to soak in enough to you believe that if someone were to see all the good and the bad in you, they could still choose to be your friend, to invest in you. It begins with a relationship with God, but it doesn't end there. It's not enough just to have this connection going this way. Okay? Adam was the first human ever created. He had perfect intimacy with God. And still, God looked at creation and he said in Genesis 2:18, it's not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper who's just right for him. God saw that no matter how close Adam and he were to each other, that there was still something different. We're still created with a need to have intimacy with other humans. And he saw that, and he sent a woman into his life so that he could experience that together. And I know that if you're feeling lonely, the idea that, well, God's with you, brother, just, okay, that's not going to really cut it. You need people, humans that you can actually interact with. I know that, and God knows that. And there are people, I believe, he will bring into your life opportunities, open doors that he will bring for intimacy. But he doesn't just magically levitate somebody over and drop them into the recliner next to you and they happen to know everything about you and they're suddenly intimate with you. Okay? It doesn't work that way. It's an opportunity for you to make an investment in a relationship. And write this down in your notes. Intimacy is a long-term investment. See, a lack of intimacy, loneliness, is a crock-pot problem. And you can't fix a crock-pot problem with a microwave solution. It's just not the same. Okay? I don't know if you've ever tried to microwave pulled pork. Doesn't work. Okay, do you know what makes pulled pork taste really good? Smoking for like 18 hours. Okay? There's no substitute for it. I love pulled pork. Now I'm getting hungry. I shouldn't have used so many food metaphors today. It's a long-term problem. Okay? I want you to think about this. Wisdom from the Bible, Proverbs 18:24. Okay? Let's look at this. The Bible says, a man of many companions. Everybody say many. Okay? Manny or Minnie, depends on where you're from, okay? A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend, everybody say friend, singular or plural? Singular. But there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. What's the wisdom from the Bible telling us? What's that illustrating? It said you can have a ton of friends. You can have a ton of connections. You can have a ton of surface value relations and still come to ruin. But there's a difference between having a bunch of surface level friends and having that one person that really knows you, because you have that one deep relationship. They stick closer even than your own family sometimes. There's value in that. But that takes an investment, okay? Think about this. Which one is the one sticking close, them or you? Both. It's both. You both have to stick in there. You both have to lean in. And so let me give you a couple of pieces of advice. When you have that foundation of intimacy with God, and you want to build on that and build intimacy with someone else, here's where you need to start. Write this down. Start with the relationships you already have. Start with the ones that are already in your life. I remember either a sophomore or a junior in college, my roommate and I, we didn't talk a whole lot late at night, but I remember this one night, he couldn't sleep, I couldn't sleep. I'm laying there in the bunk, and he said, do you think that the person you're going to marry is somebody that you already know? Like, what if the woman you're going to marry is someone you've already met? Okay? And I'm like, nah, no way. I was wrong, okay? I was completely wrong. We actually were sort of friends. We just kind of halfway barely knew each other, right? We hadn't really known each other. But the reality is, the answer to the intimacy problem in your life, it very well may be someone who already lives in your home. Doesn't have to be. I'm not saying that's the only one. I'm not saying that intimate relationships can't come into your life in a variety of forms. I'm saying if you want to build, start with the foundation that's already there. And I know there's this tendency for things to sort of gradually lose momentum. I've been doing a lot of work in my house. My house is 50 years old, and I've had it for a little less than a year, and we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to paint this and change this and rebuild this. Some of you guys know what that's like. Anybody ever gone to remodel an existing home? Yeah. Okay. Did you ever ask yourself, why didn't the previous homeowner do this? Right? Here's my theory on why. Because they got in and they did a bunch of stuff at first, and then they just kind of got used to how things were, and they stopped seeing it with fresh eyes. And someone came in, someone bought a home with fresh eyes and said, look at all the potential here. Okay? Can I just, as someone who's been married for a few years now, there's a tendency, there's a gravitational pull in a marriage that after a while, familiarity causes you to lose that fresh look and those fresh eyes. And the problem is, for some, whether or not you would ever act on this, there can become this thought that the grass is greener on the other side and that there's someone over here and there's excitement if I change partners. It should be fresh. It could be new. It could be. But you know what would happen if you chose that path? You would end up in the same spot that you are now. Because the same problems and the same thing got you there. There's value in having someone close to you who knows all of the good and the bad and who still wants to be with you. And I want you to think about what a treasure it is, the spouse that you have, those of you who are married. Okay? Especially if you've been married for a while. Okay? Just realize, guys, the muscular tone has faded and the dad bod has increased, and she's still with you. Okay? It's a good thing. All right? Ladies, you ever go back and you look at the pictures from your engagement pictures and you're like, oh my, that's a different human being than the one I see in the mirror. And he hasn't traded in for a different model. There's something valuable about someone who knows the whole story and says, I still want to be with this person. You got to invest in that. Ephesians 5:33 says, each man must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. You have to pour into that. You have to invest in that. Let me just give some suggestions. Married people with kids, have a date night. Find a way. Let the kids stay with Papa and Mima every once in a while. If you don't have parents in town, most of my life we didn't have parents in town, pay a high schooler to come watch your kids and give the money to Speed the Light and go on a date is so important. It's so easy to get caught up in parenting, and you just kind of gradually drift. And Tasha and I have a standing coffee date every Friday, and I am very upset if we have to cancel it because it's important to me. Okay? For some of you guys, it's not that. For some of you, it's having to rediscover one another once the kids are grown, because it's like we spent so much time focusing our life around parenting. Now the kids are out. I don't know what to do with all this time. I feel like I have to get to know this person again. For some of you, you don't have a spouse because they left this world or they left you, and you feel that. And I don't want to get so focused on marriage, but there's value. There's value in the siblings that you grew up with. I mean, your sister may be annoying, but there's nobody else in this world that knows those stupid cartoon drawings that you used to do, or you used to play MASH and all of the high school crushes you had. There's no one else that knows the little dance you did when you found the cleaning tape for the VCR so you could watch Power Rangers reruns again. Real life story there. There's nobody else that knows that stuff. Your siblings know stuff. They've got dirt on you. But they also have that. Okay, there's value in relationships that are already there. So first, invest in those, okay? One other piece of advice, the last thing to write down is this. As you set out to build relationships, be prepared to take risks, because intimacy requires access. It is a risky business. It's an investment, and just like any other investment, there's no guarantee of return. You may reach out and try to get to know somebody, and they may not want to be your friend. Or they may want to be your hang out every once in a while friend, but they don't want to be that we know everything there is to know about one another friend. Not everybody is going to know everything about you and love everything about you. Somebody does, and somebody will. And it can hurt to make yourself vulnerable to someone. It can hurt. Come on. It can hurt to be the one that when you make your list of friends, they're right at the top. And when they make their list of friends, you're like somewhere in the middle here. When you realize that, it stings. And the natural thing when you're hurt is to pull back and say, I'm not going to reach out like that again. I'm not going to give enough opportunity like that again. But there's no other way to build intimacy in your life. You have to keep getting up. You have to keep trying. You have to keep investing in friendships. Okay? Let me give you a great opportunity if you're like, man, I need more friends in my life. I said it earlier, but I want to say it again, and we'll put that up on the screen. This church and the people around you are a fantastic source of friendship and camaraderie. Growth Track is the best way to do that. If you said, man, I just wish I had more friends in the church, Growth Track is the place to learn about how you can connect, to learn about all of the opportunities. Some of the best relationships in our church are because people are on a serving team together. Some of the most impactful ministry in our church doesn't happen stage and seats. It happens when folks are talking to one another before service or after service, or when they're in a small group and they start this discussion back and forth. There's so much value there. And if you haven't done it, I really would encourage you to try that. You can do it next week. And we'll do it. We'll have other opportunities, but take a minute. If that's you, take a minute. Just sign up for it right now. Just text GROW to the number on the screen there. You can sign up after, or you can just show up, but we'll make enough food if you tell us you're coming. But there's so many different opportunities. You just don't want to give up and stick with loneliness because you weren't designed for it. As Dan comes back up, I understand that it's easy for the guy on the stage to say, whoa, Nelly, right? Slow down, Quick Draw McGraw. Just slow down and fix the problem right. It's easy for me to say, don't fix a crock pot problem with a microwave solution, because at this moment, I don't feel the intense emotional pain of loneliness. And I know that pain drives you to take action. This last December, I had the worst stomach bug, virus, whatever it is, of my entire life. And after emptying all of the contents of my stomach over and over and over again, I spent about 3.5, 4 days with the whole digestive tract inflamed. And it was the weirdest thing. It was 24 hours a day pain. Tylenol didn't cut it. Ibuprofen didn't cut it. I was in pain. I ended up going to the ER 2 times. After the first time I went and they said, we can't do anything for you, I went back again because I'm like, they have to do something. Okay? When you're in enough pain, I just need something to fix it now. I just need to take action. I just need to. And I understand that the pain of loneliness, the pain is what drives you to change how you interact with people so that somebody will be my friend. The pain is what drives you to make those concessions and say, I know I shouldn't be sleeping with this guy, but if I don't, he'll leave me, and I just don't want to sleep alone tomorrow. I understand the pain that drives you to choose these things, the pain that says, I'm just not getting it in my marriage anymore. Maybe if I have a new spouse, maybe things, okay, I understand. But I want you to consider a what if as we wrap up. What if the pain of loneliness in your life was brought there on purpose by the God who made you and loves you? Not to inspire action to reach out and grab the closest human that you can find. What if the pain of loneliness in your life is a season that was allowed to come into your life to drive you to action to reach out to intimacy with God? What if he allowed you to go through a season without close friends so that you would say, God, I'm so lonely? Because he's the foundation for intimate relationships. And without this foundation, he knows that reaching out this way won't be fulfilling. What if? I can't say for certainty that that's his design for you. But I can say that I've had seasons in my life where I was powerfully lonely. I went through a season of my life where truly it was me and my brother and nobody else. I don't have anybody else. I'm not close to anyone else. No one can understand what I'm going through. No one cares. No one can relate. I'm so lonely. And in that season of loneliness, I turned to God and I said, God, help me. I'm so lonely. And that was a season for me where I learned to lean in and to talk to him. It was a season where I spent a lot of time in prayer. It was a season where I spent a lot of time working on that back and forth and not just believing in God, but actually relating to him. And what happened is he used that season of loneliness to build intimacy between me and him, so that when he brought the people into my life, the humans into my life to be close with, that I had the foundation of who I am as a person and my relationship with him, that I was healthy enough to build meaningful, long-lasting, intimate relationships with humans. I know the pain that loneliness can bring. But I want you to consider, before you shake your fist and you say, you did this, why? Consider the possibility that he actually did this. But the why is because he loves you. And he doesn't want you to put a temporary fix on a long-term solution. He wants you to experience meaningful relationships, not surface ones. And if you're in a season where that's not happening with a human, you need to know he is always there for you. And if you come to him, his ear is open. And he cares, and he sees, and he knows. Loneliness is a heavy burden, and it's one that it takes a long time to put down. But as you trust him with the process, he will help you build that intimacy with him, to make the long-term investments with others. to come out of the other side of that with meaningful, enriching relationships that help you along the path until you reach the end of your journey. Hey, this is Pastor Chris again. Thanks for listening. If today's talk was helpful in your spiritual life, odds are there's someone you know who could benefit from it. Take a minute right now to share it with them. And if you live in the area, come try out a service in person, because church is more fun with friends. See you next time.